Hi, this is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And boy, oh boy, do I have a wonderful story behind this book because I have a wonderful guest. His name is Ron Turker, Dr. Ron Turker, and he has written one of the very, very best books I have read because it is just brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. That's the only word I can use for it. And I am so happy to welcome you to Joy on Paper Live so that we can talk about The Wandering Jew of St. Salacious. Now, this book is so good. I just can't even, I don't know where to start with you because it is just, it's brilliant. That's the word I have to use. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
There's so many reasons. I, of course, mentioned that you're a doctor, and I love this book. I remember when I first started Joy on Paper, the radio program over 9 years ago, one of my first guests was Robin Cook. Now, of course, he wrote Coma. And I remember reading that book because I was working in a hospital as a candy striper.
Oh, yeah.
We were allowed to work in those days at a very young age. I was 14 years old and I was working already and I loved it. I was always interested in everything medical. I wanted to become a doctor and go to Africa. And it's funny in a way, the connection here with the Wandering Jew of St. Salacious, because I had seen that wonderful movie, The Nun Story. I wanted to go as a doctor. I didn't want to be a nun, but I wanted to go as a doctor to Africa. I worked my way up and spent a lot of time around doctors in hospitals. Eventually, I was a medical tech. I want to tell people that you are a pediatric or orthopedic surgeon. And wow, in hospitals, you can't get higher than that because that is one of the most I know neurosurgeons always think, no, psychiatrists always think they're the best. They're sure of it. And then the neurosurgeons, and we go, but we all know that you're at the top of the line because working on kids that's something special. So you bring that certainly into the book. And the Wandering Jew of Saint Salacious. Saint Salacious, when I first read it, like I was, what, did I get that wrong? But boy, it turned out to be a very appropriate title. So where are we going to start with this book? I want to start with just one little blurb. You're getting fantastic reviews. Everybody loves this book. Just amazing. But I did want to start with this one from Jerome Preisler. He's a New York Times best-selling author. He's been a guest on my program many times. And my favorite book of his is called Civil War Commando. And so he wrote this lovely blurb for you, and I will read it. Sharply written with an entertaining balance of humor and heart, the compelling debut novel, The Wandering Jew of St. Salacious by Ron Turker, unmasks truths of the U.S. healthcare system in a way only a medical insider could. And boy, oh boy, is that true. Oh, where do you want to start? What do you want to say first? And then I've got a lot of questions.
I think let's start with what Jerome said, and I do so appreciate that blurb. But the reason I wrote this book was because there's truth in fiction. So I used the vehicle of fiction to open the conversation about what's going on with our healthcare system, and that I've written plenty of op-eds and essays, personal narratives, and so forth about medicine over the years, and they get some traction for a short bit of time, but then they die off. The media cycle moves on, and news articles come and go. But I wanted to write something that would have a little bit of lasting power, some legs. And so I decided to go back and try my hand at fiction, and then go back to my comedy roots and make it funny, so that even though the message is a difficult message, it's a bitter pill, I wrapped it in comedy and humor to make it easier to swallow.
You certainly got the humor in there. So you were a stand-up comic, and which is a good thing, I think, sometimes when you're in medicine. And you really have tackled the subject of what's going on in the medical world. And one of the things right at the beginning of I will tell you, everybody, there's a couple of lawsuits in this book. There are a couple of other interesting developments. But right at the beginning, you're talking about a product that goes wrong. And well, and one of the things, of course, you have somebody in the from the company that creates this product, just like they do in all surgeries, somebody who represents a company.
Hmm.
And in my days when I was young, they were the people who came from the medical companies, from the supply companies, from the pharmaceutical companies were called detail men. They came along and they would charm all the girls in the office so that they could get in to see the doctor. And then they'd get in to see the doctor, and everybody was happy because they'd give little samples out. And that's what they did. Then at some point, as we went along in the years, they changed them to pretty women, girls with short skirts. So it wasn't detail men anymore, it was detail girls. But I know many doctors who got trips to St. Bart's or to Hawaii because they got through that front door. And I hated it then and I hate it now.
I'll start off by saying that, so I'm in the surgical field, so it's not necessarily medicines that they typically want to talk about with us at all. That's pretty uncommon, except for one exception that I'll circle back to. But in general, some of the products are very complicated, and the companies do offer to have someone in there who's had tons of training on their specific product, so that if there's a nuance with this particular type of instrumentation, these screws, these rods, these plates, etc., that we're using to help realign bones, that they can be there in the operating room and they can be very helpful. Where it crosses the line is what you brought up, which is the trips to St. Bart's or the ski weekends, or they went from handing out nice pens and plastic models of the skeleton to putting surgeons on planes, having them go to weekend meetings to learn how to implant their product, etc. And that is a problem. It's something that I have warned my residents about for over 30 years is that's not okay. You got to stay away from that. But it's perennially alluring and people fall for it. So it is one of those things where at the beginning of every academic talk, they'll have a slide disclosure saying this surgeon works as a consultant for the following companies. Sometimes they're really consultants and it's in name only. What they're doing is they're taking a portion of perhaps sales of a product. It's really the things that we have tried to avoid through various legislation throughout the years. It's an uncomfortable relationship at the very least, and it's not healthy. And we work in healthcare. There are on the periphery, and sometimes less so than the periphery. Sometimes it gets into the center of care where we have doctors who work too closely with industry and are considered consultants, but that's not our job for the most part. And if it is, then we should derive our salary just as being a consultant for a company rather than for medical care. That's my feeling.
Let's go to your book, which covers that and so many other things. And we'll talk about now, this is a medical drama, and it is just as exciting as anybody who ever read Coma. That was exciting. You've created so many things in this book that are wonderful. The excitement of the procedures that your main character, Dr. Martin Fischer, does, Marty. And he is really a guy in shining armor. He's like that knight who's ready to fight. He's out there taking chances, not quiet at all, which is why we now have the book, because the book is what makes it so exciting. You have this guy he's a Don Quixote. He's fighting all of this. And that is the brilliance of this book. Marty is, I think he's, for anybody who reads this book, they will love Marty because they know he's on the side of right and he's on the side of patience and the people. So tell us how you created Marty.
I'd say Marty is more of a knight in dented armor than shining armor.
Yeah, he gets beaten up a lot.
He does.
Poor Marty. Poor
um,
Marty.
yeah, yeah. He is more of a Quixote character in that he just keeps trying to tilt at the next windmill and he doesn't take no for an answer. He's very black and white. He lacks a lot of nuance. And where Marty came from, he's a a conglomerate of a number of different physicians, surgeons and non-surgeons that I know that really do take their role seriously about not just taking care of patients, but taking care of healthcare. Meaning like calling it out when they've seen something that isn't right. And for 30, 40 years since medical school, I've had the pleasure of working with different physicians side by side, and they've really they've definitely informed me, especially when I was younger, about this is what we're here for. We're here not just for the patients, we're here for each other, and we're here to make things better each and every year. And so that's Marty. Marty's a conglomerate. And Marty is also, he's pretty obtuse. He really can't, he has trouble with the nuance part of life, and that is what gets him into trouble. And that's where his best friend comes into play, Ralph.
Yes, oh, we need a little bit of levity when because what Marty does is the work, the actual surgery is, and the way you write about it is really compelling. Having watched surgeries, having been in the operating room, um, wow, you capture it. And for people, sometimes people who read a medical book, they close their eyes for a page. You know, but I kept my eyes open for every little cut, every little drop of blood, because I've seen it, so it didn't bother me. But you write it so well.
It was tricky. I tried to write it so it was accessible to everybody, but at the same time, keep it true to life, to bring people into that space with us, with the surgical team. And remember, it's not just a surgeon in the operating room, it's a huge team of anesthesiologists, nurses, surgical techs, and then everybody who, when we're done with a case, that comes in after us in between cases and from environmental services and cleans up that room so that it's so that the infection rates stay low. There's such a huge bench that people are on that are working as a team together. I tried to bring the outsider on the inside. um, Sometimes I feel it is that inner sanctum, the holy of holies, where patients, excuse me, like their families and the lay public, they don't get to see behind the curtain. And so that's what I wanted to do, was just bring them in.
You do, and that's the beauty of the book. It takes you into the world, it takes you into the hospital environment in a different way than most, even a patient feels. Because here we're walking the halls with the doctor, and there is a lot of humor, there is a lot of silliness sometimes in a hospital, and you need that because you're dealing with such sorrow sometimes with losing patients, what you have to do. And for doctors, it's horrendous. Doctors, people don't realize, and most people don't understand the strain that a doctor feels for so much that goes on in a hospital. But Marty is going to, we find Marty in two different hospitals and two different environments, and how he handles things is your whole cast of characters. We'll call them a cast of characters because I see this someday as a movie. So for me, they became cast of characters, one after another. Each of the people that you introduce, and in a way, I hate to say everybody because they come as a surprise, from the simplest gardener to everybody, to somebody who's working med techs or x-ray techs, or all of them. You bring them to life, and sometimes in in a paragraph your writing is exquisite. It really is. I am so thrilled just with the actual writing. Of course, I go back, I read a lot of books, but I went back and sometimes just one or two lines that you write, and they're like perfection. And once in a while, I would think to myself, I don't know if you actually do this, but there were places where in the book where I'd read something and I'd say, oh my goodness, when he wrote that, did he jump up from his seat and just dance around the room, do a jig? And I didn't. Do you feel that way sometimes? Because sometimes it's so great. I just envy you that ability because, yeah, it's terrific.
I very much appreciate your words. I feel a little bit unworthy, but yes, thank you very much. As far as the writing goes, in writing is it's constant revision, and that's where the writing really happens. And what my part of my process is, I have the computer read back my own words to me with that kind of atonal voice that the computer has. And I use the one with Kate, who has a British accent, who I love. But in any case, there are times where I'll be listening to it. And yeah, there'll be a line that I'll be like, ooh, yeah, that tugs a little bit, and that's good. That one landed. And there are times where I get a little bit of a chuckle, but not much. As a comic, it's hard to get me to laugh. Even myself, it's hard for me to laugh at my own jokes. But I think there's a lot of the use of metaphors in the book because, in a way, that's how I teach. That's how for 30 years, I've been teaching, is using metaphors to help to help my students and the residents remember what it is we're trying to learn. And that came out in the book. It just naturally came out on paper.
It does. And it's great because your metaphors are so apt wherever you use them. I, and again, you have to have a metaphor madness book. Just you're good at it.
Oh,
You're so good. I don't know. I hate to give away things, as I said, but there are some characters in the book. We'll just say that Marty learns a lot as he goes along. He has to learn, as you said, in the beginning, he's not that socially, he's a little bit inept. He's not really great at dealing with people all the time. So, in a way, he sees the real person, which is sometimes not good because then sometimes, when you see somebody for what they are, you really shouldn't say it.
yes.
you
He's
know,
not a patient man, and he has
yeah.
a very thin filter when it comes to his colleagues. And it's the same as in comedy. In comedy, there's a saying, you never punch down. So people who are in a perceived status, lower than the surgeon or whatever, Marty never really goes after them, but his colleagues, especially those who don't have the good intentions for the patients, he just goes straight at it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He goes straight. And again, you handle it so beautifully. Of course, we have conflict with some of the management, and in medicine, as in everything, there's politics. Everybody's
Yeah.
playing their own little game, and everybody has this power struggle, and everybody wants something or the other from the other person. You have a lot of those characters.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lifetime of living with those characters and getting the call from Cubicle 487. You didn't comply with the following. This is Thursday, and remember, doctor, on Thursdays we enter the hospital with our left foot first, and it's been reported that's not what happened. So yeah, so Marty lives that life too, along with me.
He does, and I got such a kick out of Marty just from the minute in the first few pages. I said to myself, "Oh, I just want to know Marty." So maybe we'll talk a little bit about you because there's some of Marty in you, and I love he has sometimes words of wisdom, like what his dad told him. So when his dad says, he has a line of, "What have you? What is it? What have you done good today? And what have you? What is it? What have you done?
Who
Or
have you helped and who
yeah,
have you hurt? That's
yeah."
it. It was a dinner time question. Who have you helped and who have you hurt?
So was that your dad? Did it come from your dad, or did you come? You have a lot of Zeta stuff here. Where did that all come from?
That really was a concoction of, unfortunately, I never really got to know my grandfathers at all. One died before I was born, and then my Zeta, my grandfather, that's the Yiddish for grandfather, he died when I was about 3. But my father, and that was my mother's dad, but my father would always tell me what a wonderful man he was. And so in my head, I imagined what he would have been like. And the Zeta that's in this book, who leads every chapter, he's the Zeta that I imagined. He's the grandfather's voice that's wise yet funny and willing to play a little bit.
Yes, at the beginning of each chapter, you have a Zeta comment, and they're always apropos for that chapter. So very good. And with Marty, you have his backstory, and then once he gets involved in one sort of confrontation with the medical legal world, which unfortunately doctors do get involved with a medical legal problem. It's a really such a problem for doctors. They're not just dealing with medicine all the time. They're dealing so often with legal problems.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I do believe there's a, and I'll deviate from the book for a moment. Marty was blindsided by that lawsuit, but in many cases, it's pretty clear that the better the communicator a physician is, the less likely he or she is going to end up in a lawsuit. And so that's something also I try to impart on my residents and students is that slow down and be a good communicator, and your likelihood of being sued will go way down. It's not what you like put in the chart and said, I saw this and I did this and I did that. Those things are important, but that's not, we shouldn't get tests because we're worried about lawsuits. We shouldn't do extra procedures because we're worried about a lawsuit. We should slow down and communicate with our patients and say, this is what I think would be the next best step. And if that's not working, we can change plans, we can change course. That I think would help all of us lower the temperature and the legal temperature as well. Um, but it does takes time to do that, and that's one things that doctors are starving for is time with their patients. So therein lies the crux, and that's the conversation. That's part of the conversation that I wanted to get started. Was what people say just generally, time is money. In the medical world, saying time is money means move faster, see more patients in less time because time is money. Um, but I believe that the currency of medical care is actually time. And the equation still fits. Time is money. The real currency of medical care, of good medical care, is taking the time to figure out what's right and what the patient in front of you and their family wants, rather than just rushing through the visit, checking off 6 boxes and saying, go get these labs, get this image, and then go see these 2 referrals of the neurologist and the endocrinologist, et cetera, et cetera. I think if we slow down, we'll deliver care more carefully and with kindness and compassion. And also, oh my gosh, we can really elevate care.
Yeah, it's true. One of the problems in medicine today is time. Now, of course, with Marty and being an orthopedic surgeon in general, an orthopedic surgeon, particularly in Marty's case where he's coming with people who have been injured in accidents, you don't have much time to talk to a patient when they come into the hospital. But Marty has a wonderful attitude towards patients. He really does. He actually really cares, and it's I don't know. He just has a wonderful attitude.
Marty was a wonderful character to live with for a few years. He really, there was a lot about him that kind of grew as I kept writing and writing. Marty changed. Marty was not that character at the very beginning in the first draft. He was a little more hard edged and not as accessible, but the Marty that kind of grew out of this was someone who really he cared and cared deeply about his patients. It wasn't about him, it was about the patients. And he was a great character to write because he just kept giving me great lines and great scenarios. And yeah, Marty loves medicine very deeply and he loves his patients. But he
Yes,
doesn't have time for
I
he
know.
doesn't have time for nonsense. Um,
Exactly. Now, of course, this, as we said, this is your debut book, but it is so superior. It is so great. How many novels you might have stuck in your drawer somewhere that you didn't bring out, but how did you get to this point where you finally got a book written? It took you quite a few years, and as Marty occupied your brain and all those little brain cells he's been dancing around in up there, and he took over your life in many ways. Then once he's fully formed and he says, "Okay, this is time. I want to get out in the world, people to meet me." How did that come about? How did you finally? When did you realize, boy, I have a great? Did you realize that I have a great book? If I wrote this book at one point, I'd say to myself, "Oh my gosh, this is so good! I'm going to drive myself crazy. It's so good."
yeah, no, I still struggle with that. It is my first novel. And as far as books in the drawer, I never really had that much time. I would write short pieces because that's what I had time to do. To get this book out there, Marty occupied, as you said, Marty occupied a big portion of my life. He occupied a big portion of my nights. I would get up at 3:30 and write for a couple hours before work because that's the time that I had. And that's the time when my brain was really most creative. And I started writing this book in about 2017, worked with a wonderful woman who was a creative writing instructor who I had worked with just before doing like little short stories and essays. But that was 10 years prior. And she had moved away. And I reached out to her when I decided to write this book. And I asked her, I said, Samantha, would you be willing to edit my book? And I'll pay you. And she said, no. She said, but she was rewriting a novel that she had written. And she said, I always loved your writing. We can help each other. And we'll go chapter by chapter. And you'll edit my book and I'll edit yours. To which I replied, I don't know how to edit. And she said, I'll teach you. And she taught me long form writing. She taught me how to edit. She taught me so much. And we would meet once a week at a coffee shop until COVID and hammer out chapters and so forth. It was fantastic. Fantastic. In 2022, I had lots of agents that had been pulling partial manuscripts, full manuscripts, and I got a lot of positive responses about it. I love the writing, I love the story, but I don't know where to put this in the bookstore. So therefore, we're going to take a pass. And that just happened over and over again. And then they would say to me again, no, I don't know, where do you envision it in the bookstore, Ron? And I would say, I envision it toward the front, maybe on a table with a little tag that says a favorite. Yeah. But that didn't sell the book. So I gave myself a deadline of December of 2022 because there's a lot of things in this book that are apropos to now, things that are happening now. Um, Women's health, white supremacy. And there's all sorts of things in this book that are about the now. And so I had this deadline, a self-imposed deadline, and I said, if nobody's going to pick up this book, I will self-publish it. And December came of 2022, and an agent that I had spoken to in the summer, and she never got back to me, she writes back and says, so sorry about the delay, stuff at home, blah, blah, blah. She said, but I love this book. I'm afraid I couldn't get it past the owner of the agency because she said, I don't know where to put it. I don't know how to sell it. And we're going to take a pass, but I love the book. And I wrote back and I said, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And that was that. The next day, I got an email from her and she said, taking off my professional hat here, this book needs to be in print. This book needs to be in the public's eye. And she said, I know how hard it is, and I know what authors go or writers go through. She said, I'm just speaking to you on a personal note. Please don't give up on your book and don't put it in a drawer. And that was enough for me to sit down and to learn the whole self-publishing industry. And it launched in the end of March in 2023. And
Yeah. So it didn't go through a regular publisher. Oh, they're
no,
so stupid. They are so stupid. And this does belong at the front door on its own table with a big sign that this is a brilliant book. This is what is so annoying because this happens so often. I hate when they say, where should we put it? I hate that because when you have a great book, like just in a bookstore, put it right at the front under, have one shelf that says great books of the year. And this is going to be the great book of many years because this is a book that people will read for years and years. And it is, oh, it aggravates me to hear that. But thank goodness she was smart enough to say that to you because this book, I know you've already received a nice number of reviews, but it's still very difficult to get out there when you're self-publishing. It's very hard to reach people, and a lot of it is going to be word of mouth. So I hope that you're doing a lot with, well, I don't know. What can I say? When you capture the essence of a hospital, the essence of what it is to be in medicine today, the all of the problems and all of the joys, the characters that you've developed. I will only say that there's one particular character who's Irish, and I love Irish. Of Irish people. I love listening to Irish people. And you capture an Irish woman so beautifully that just for her alone, if there's only Marty and there's only her and a few problems in between, that would be great. But the whole story of her and Marty and all of the other people, the gardener, the everybody, you have a little masterpiece on your hands here.
I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. In the end, the book did it has sold well, and it did in a couple of bookstores. It showed up where I didn't expect it to show up, and there's a number of the wonderful thing about living in Portland is that there's so many wonderful independent bookstores, but the book has shown up on the table in front with recommendations in a number of bookstores, and I'm like, wow. It's like I couldn't ask for more. That's
Well, so you
great. Thank
stand
you.
in front of the table, and you take selfies, and you.
I, I don't know. It's selling in places that I don't know how it gets there. It's sold in Boston, in Kalamazoo. It's sold in Australia, Great
Oh,
Britain, Canada.
I know I know who bought it in Kalamazoo. It's a relative.
What?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Not many
it's
people have
actually even in the
relatives in Kalamazoo.
library. Yeah, it's in the library in Kalamazoo and
I know.
Tucson, and it's just weird places. I'm like,
It
I don't
it
know how
it
it gets there.
it is just so good, and there's so many things I love about it. I love how you capture the hospital at night. For people who have ever worked in a hospital, I used to take always the night shift because I love hospitals at night. And it is a very special time in a hospital. And for anybody who has ever worked in a hospital, they know that time. And then what's also wonderful is that everything changes at night. And when there's a problem, when there's a accident that comes in, there's some kind of horrific emergency, everybody works together. It doesn't matter where you are in a hospital, what floor you're on, when there's a big problem, an accident, some kind of emergency, a fire, whatever, and they're bringing in these patients at a rapid pace, and everybody pulls together. It's a beautiful thing to behold how the teamwork it's almost, although you might not have worked in a team with the different people, suddenly you're all working together, and it's a beautiful thing to behold, and you capture that also, that night shift in the hospital.
Yeah, and it is a special time in the hospital is at night when there's more space to think and breathe. There's quiet and there's chaos, and they come in small quantities, and then it can be a rush. And yeah, there is something different about the hospital at night that I love. Yeah, and I've always appreciated when I could be there at night working.
It's very special. You walk the hallways and it's different. It's not just the quietness, but maybe it's the lost souls that are floating around there, because you feel it. You feel really, in a way, the glory of medicine at that point, because if something happens, everybody will swing into action, and that's a
Now,
good feeling.
yeah, when you talk about the lost souls and the souls of the past, both people that work there, the patients, etc. Now you're starting to get into a teaser for the next book.
Okay, good. I know there's going to be a next book, so that's going to be in the next book, because for anybody who's, I won't even tell. I was going to tell a story about going to the autopsy, but anyway, there's lots of wonderful things to write about in the hospitals. I'm so happy that the book is doing not well enough. It should be. Oh, where's New York Times when you need them? Somebody should be reviewing this book on a high, very high level, because this is a wonderful book. When I first got it and I saw the title, and as I said, The Wandering Jew of Saint Salatius. It's not, I don't want people to be turned off and think that Some people will say it's a religious book. No, it's not. I would concentrate more on Salacious if I was anybody. And it has it has some adult moments in it which are just delightful in a very nice way. Chapter 22 particularly is, now that's a way to entice people. I'm going to tell all of you people, don't read chapter 22. Don't read it.
There you go.
Get the book and skip chapter 22. Now that's right there. Maybe we'll get people who are going to buy that book just so they, so that they
Yeah,
can
no,
get.
don't read chapter 22. No.
Yeah. Do you agree? Do you agree?
That's
I
an
mean,
odd moment in chapter 22.
yeah.
It's a
Did you
very,
have fun writing chapter 22? Oh,
oh, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I not had fun. I shouldn't say that. I don't think people don't read it. Don't read it. Really. Get this book, but don't read it. Skip over that chapter. It's right there, or just a little ways in. Um, I didn't know what to do with that chapter. I read it once. As a matter of fact, I'm a little bit of a prude. So I read it and I skipped a few lines. And then I said, oh my goodness, I have to review this book. I have to talk about this book. So I better go back and read chapter 22 again. And again. So I did it just for you.
Great.
I'm one of these people. I don't leave any page unturned.
I had to read chapter 22 a lot. So
Yeah, I was thinking maybe you did. That's a good chapter. And again, I love an Irish little. When I lived in England for many years, and I loved going over to Ireland just to hear Irish men talk. Because I think it's such a wonderful, sexy accent, much better than French. And of course, in this case, we have a lovely girl with a lovely lilt, and you write it so well. Although you're not Irish, but you managed. I think perhaps maybe you found somebody, maybe I don't know, close to you, who at least knew where to find an Irish accent, right?
indeed.
Indeed, indeed. And oh, I so enjoy talking to you. Let's just give people a little background so they really understand that you're a really great doctor, and some of the places you work in and where you've done some work, because I think people like to know the background of somebody like you.
Yeah, at least once a year for the last 30 plus years since I was a fellow in Chicago, I have traveled overseas to do work mostly in Colombia, in the country of Colombia, in a small town in the southwest part of Colombia. I'm actually heading there again in looks like about 2.5 weeks. And from there, started branching out to other Latin American countries, worked in Ecuador and Peru with various groups. And then I've worked over in Jordan with the Syrian refugees over the years with a different NGO called the Syrian American Medical Society, where I am the token Jew. And then SAMS also at the beginning of the Ukrainian war sent me to Ukraine to open up lines of communication and logistical lines and to bring in equipment. But yeah, I've been in a lot of different countries working. It has been an incredible educational experience for me. I learned from surgeons in other countries where when I was young, I thought, oh, I'm going to go and teach. The surgeons in those countries taught me how to really operate and operate with less, how to take care of people with less equipment, with what you have on hand, and how to tailor the surgeries so that you could accomplish what you wanted to accomplish without doing too much. And I got to tell you, it really was just an experience that allowed me to grow as a surgeon. And really, gosh, it made me so much more comfortable here at home when we get to the operating room and one of the nurses says, we don't have this piece of equipment today or something. I'm like, that's fine. We have all sorts of other options. And that was taught to me by surgeons throughout the world, how to work with less. And I have undying gratitude for that.
And of course, it's funny that you put yourself through college with your comedy routine.
Actually, it really started in medical school. Did a little dip my toe in college, but in medical school was where it really took off, and that was difficult because I would be in the clubs at night, and then you can't just finish your set and go. you have to, if you really want to keep working, you got to sit around and schmooze for a little bit. So I would get home at 1 in the morning, or if I was on the road, I would get home at maybe, sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning, and get up at 5 to get back to work the next day at school. And so it was quite the experience for a while. And I did, toward the end of my senior year in medical school, I had to make a decision. What direction am I going to go? And I thought about maybe following the comedy career a little bit longer, seeing what happens. I had a manager and I had plenty of work, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna give the medicine thing a go. And it was the right decision. It was wonderful, but it really, those comedy days and nights really honed my presentation in the office, in the clinics, where I could put people at ease a little bit more quickly than some of my friends and colleagues, because you're just playing to a smaller audience in the room. And those days in the clinic, I would tell my wife when I got home exhausted, are like, it's like a 30-act play. You have to read the room, you have to see what they're there for and listen to the story, and then play to that crowd, and to bring what I learned in medical school and beyond to bear. But the comedy days really prepared me for those interactions more than anything else.
I think the book is brilliant, and
Thank you.
I'm really so impressed with it. I hope that just keep pushing it because it's a wonderful book. Wow, everyone really, when you get this book, I love a book that makes me laugh out loud. There are things that bring tears to my eyes. It's like you go up and down. Your pacing for somebody who, now I think you did work with an editor, right? At one point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah.
who, I don't know where you got this. It's probably just a natural because I don't think that in the end, the actual pacing is so good because you bring us up, you bring us down, you just build the momentum, the suspense, the worry as we worry about patients. And then suddenly everything will switch over and Marty will do something that's just so darn funny. Or he'll have an observation, whether it is Jesus winking at him. You never know what's going to happen with Marty.
Right.
Boy, and he
Yeah.
notices things. And then these beautiful moments. I think the garden moments are so lovely. Everything that you've come out with in this book. It's just a glorious ride. For anybody who loves books, this book is a winner and you deserve really a lot of
Thank you.
credit and a lot of praise.
I will give a shout out to both Samantha Waltz, who is the woman who really honed my writing skills early on, and she wrote her novel called The Choice of Men, which is a wonderful novel. But then John Didakis was the heavy lift editor at the end, and you talk about pacing. He writes political thrillers, and yes,
And
he's the author of
I
the
have his
Lark Chadwick mysteries. Yes, thank you.
I
But
have his
he was the
quote here.
one,
Yeah.
yeah, who made sure that my pacing was on target. There were times where John would have to say, "Okay, we spent a lot of time in Marty's head, and moving on." And yeah, so I shout out to both of them as
Yeah,
people that
absolutely.
really hone the craft.
But but in the end it all comes to your brilliant mind and of course the fact that Marty took over your head in certain sections, some of those gray cells. and
Oh, absolutely.
and
Yeah,
he's
yeah, he still lives in there.
oh yeah,
He
I'm sure
he'll
he's
be
got a
in the
lot.
next a younger Marty will be in the next book.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's something to look forward to. So we'll
Yeah.
have you back here in about a year, maybe less, I hope. I'm ready for it next week because I didn't want it to end. But it ends so beautifully too. Yeah. Again, there's many ways you could have ended it. And you almost, you took us up and down like I'm a nervous wreck. I was a nervous wreck at the end. I was like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And then it's a wonderful ending and just
Thank you.
everything about it is so great. I have your website here. It's just Ron Turker, and it is now available also on Audible.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, as of a week and a half ago. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
how was that?
That was an interesting experience. I auditioned for it to be the narrator because I told the production company I would I wasn't going to just say it's going to be me. I wanted to audition, and I sent in a demo tape, and they gave me the green light. But I really had to learn how to approach that microphone in a different way. It's not a microphone like a stand-up comic uses. It is a very sensitive microphone where it picks up everything. It picks up any little clicks and tongue clicks, and it seems like I grew extra teeth while I was narrating this thing, and my tongue got bigger or something, and you have to learn how to hold your mouth in such a way that you're not making pops, and et cetera, et cetera. It picked up gut rumbles if I was hungry. Pretty sure it picked up some thoughts I had from the fifth grade. It just was a sensitive mic. So when I started that recording, it was a month after we had a horrible storm here in Portland that blew down thousands of trees. And so every chainsaw and chipper shredder in Portland was going. So no matter how deep a booth you have, those noises would get through. So it was a slow process of getting it recorded at first. But then it picked up speed as I got more comfortable and as the chainsaws got put away.
I'm so happy for you. You've done a wonderful job. I know that it's going to be by word of mouth a lot, but I think it's going to get there because this is a book that people once they read it, you want to talk to everybody about it, even your relatives in Kalamazoo. So so again, thank you so much, Ron Turker, for being on Joy on Paper live. I've My voice is going because I've been talking so much, but I could talk to you for another hour. I could talk to you about medicine, but also on a serious note, people, what can people do? Let's give one last little bit of advice for people in dealing with the medical world today. What can they do? I know people feel helpless. I know there's a lot of, I, as you said, with your situation, you're a doctor and you have trouble getting a doctor.
Yeah.
What can people do?
It's
What
time
again?
for all of us. Yeah, it's time to push back and to push back. We can be gentle about it, but we deserve, and it's okay to say, I need your attention. It's okay to continue to call the office and say, I have not heard the test results, or we don't have a plan going forward. I need a plan from the doctor. I need what the next steps are, and then after that, and so forth. And to really say, this is not okay. And that includes not just speaking with the physicians and so forth, that includes looking at our bills and saying, wait a minute, why am I being charged for this and why am I being charged for that and so forth? It is time for us to start really questioning what we are on the receiving end in medical care, and to talk to our representatives and say, this is not okay. And to talk to our friends and say, this is what I experienced. And does that seem okay to you? And if not, why aren't we demanding something better, more efficient, more time, less money? Other countries do it for half the price that we do it, and they have better health outcomes than we do, much better. It's time
So
for us to demand and say, no, we are not going to take status quo anymore. We need to level that kind of that tilted power dynamic and say, I know that you guys are currently holding all the power and all the chips, but it's time for us to start asking for them back and demanding.
okay. Okay. Again, thank you so much, Ron Turker. And the name of the book is The Wandering Jew of St. Salatius. Please skip chapter 22. Don't read chapter 22.
No, don't read that.
Okay, everybody. Thank you again, Ron. So great to
Thank
talk
you
to you.
so much, Patsy, for having me on. Thank you.
It's a joy. Okay. Bye bye now. Bye.
Bye. She said, I don't know where to put it. I don't know how to sell it, but I love the book. He is more of a Quixote character in that just keeps trying to tilt at the next windmill, and he doesn't take no for an answer. More of a knight in dented armor than shining armor. And she said, this book needs to be in print. This book needs to be in the public's eye.
Turn the house down.